I wasn't tired, I wasn't sleepy, but every time I ate the soup they gave me, I blacked out like someone flipped a switch in my brain. I used to be a chemistry teacher, sharp rationale, not someone you could fool easily. But my daughter and her husband tried to drug me into signing away everything I owned. Don't believe me, I've got the video. I've got the evidence. And I had a plan they never saw coming. Watch until the end, because the way I turn the tables, it'll make you want to stand up and clap. If you believe older people deserve respect and the right to write their own ending, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and share this story with someone who needs the strength to speak up. I'm Helen, and this is how I took my life back. I didn't feel tired, I wasn't groggy, and I sure wasn't sick. But halfway through a bowl of chicken and wild rice soup, I blinked and then woke up 2 hours later in my bedroom, fully dressed with the sun already down. It wasn't exhaustion. It was like someone had flipped a switch in the back of my head and powered me off. That was the first time. I'm Helen Carter. I'm 77 years old, a retired high school chemistry teacher, and a widow of nearly 12 years. I live now in a small upstairs apartment in Portland, Oregon, a cozy little place with mismatched curtains, a second-hand recliner, and a porch view of the sunrise I never take for granted. But 3 months ago, I wasn't here. 3 months ago, I was lying on my back in a hospital bed in Eugene after slipping on the icy porch while hauling in groceries because I was too proud to let the neighbor boy help. The fall left me with a fractured wrist, a bruised hip, and a stern lecture from my doctor that I couldn't live alone while healing. That's when Lori, my daughter, and her husband Brad offered to take me in for a little while. At the time, I thought it was kind. They cleared out a guest room, brought in a hospital bed, bought a pill organizer the size of a small bookshelf. Lori kissed my forehead and said, "We'll take care of everything, Mom." At first they did. Meals were hot. My medications were right where I needed them. Brad even put up grab bars in the bathroom. The house was quiet, almost too quiet sometimes, but I chalked it up to Lori's preference for scented candles and soft jazz. The first week passed in a blur of soups, pills, and back-to-back episodes of cooking shows I couldn't keep track of. I slept a lot, but that made sense. Pain medication, healing bones, boredom, it all stacks up on a person. But by week 3, something felt off. I started waking up in the middle of the night, confused about where I was. One time I opened the closet and stared at a winter coat like it was a stranger. Another morning I walked into the kitchen thinking it was Tuesday. Lori said it was Thursday. I wasn't scared at first, just unsettled. Then came the soup. Every other night, Lori would bring me a small bowl of soup before dinner, saying it would settle my stomach so I wouldn't need the heavier meal. It tasted fine, mild, sometimes bland, but every time I ate it, I'd lose hours. I'd close my eyes for just a minute, and the next thing I knew it was nighttime, and Brad would be gently tapping on my door saying I must have been extra tired. Tired? I wasn't tired. I was being erased. I remember one afternoon particularly well. It was a Wednesday. I'd spent most of the morning on the back patio, watching the birds fight over seeds Lori had scattered on the railing. She came out smiling and handed me a small white bowl of creamy potato soup. I took 2 spoonfuls. Warm, rich, slightly metallic. I blinked. And I woke up on the living room couch in my pajamas. The sun was gone. My wrist brace had been removed. There was a blanket tucked around my legs I didn't remember fetching. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from something colder, something old, a feeling I hadn't felt since childhood when my older brother tried to convince me I'd imagined him breaking Mom's crystal bowl. It was gaslighting, but worse, it was coming from my own daughter. Later that night, I asked Lori what day it was. Her answer came too fast. "It's Thursday, Mom. Remember you got confused yesterday, too." That stuck with me. Not just the words, but how quickly she said them like she'd rehearsed. That was when the dots began connecting. My missing pills. The way Brad always volunteered to serve my meals, but never sat to eat with me. The faint taste of aluminum in the food. The sudden forgetfulness. The way the power of attorney papers, just for emergencies, were sitting in a folder on the kitchen counter one morning. "You've been a little fuzzy lately," Mom Lori told me over tea. "Don't worry, we've got everything under control. Everything." That's when I stopped drinking the tea. That's when I started pretending to forget even more where my shoes were, what day it was, which drawer held the spoons, And that's when I knew this wasn't care. It was containment. Brad started locking the pill cabinet. Lori started whispering on the phone behind the laundry door. And I started writing everything down times Taste's foggy hours on the back of crossword puzzles and tucked them into my bra drawer. Because something was happening to me. Not in me to me. And if I didn't find proof soon, there wouldn't be a me left to defend. That night I stared at the ceiling for hours. The shadows didn't move. The silence didn't comfort me. But my mind was awake, crystal clear. I was 77. I wasn't senile. I wasn't tired. I was being drugged. And no one who knew me was going to believe it. So I made a choice. I would stop reacting and start watching. I would pretend to be exactly what they wanted me to be, docile, forgetful, fading. But behind my eyes I was recording everything. Because one day soon the silence in that house would end, and my voice, the one they thought was slipping away, would return sharper than ever. And when it did, I'd make sure they heard every word. They thought I was slipping, so I let them think I was falling. It didn't take long before the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every time I had the soup, and only the soup, I'd drift into a sleep so deep it felt chemical. Not like drifting off in your recliner with a Hallmark movie humming in the background. No, this was different. Heavy, sudden. Like someone pulled the plug on my mind and left my body upright to slump like a puppet. So I tested it. I skipped the soup one night, pretending I'd already eaten earlier. I drank a glass of water, smiled, and told Lori I wasn't very hungry. That night, I read for 2 straight hours, wide awake. No fog, no gaps in time. The next evening, I ate everything on my plate except the soup. I stirred it, moved it around to make it look eaten, then poured half of it into a napkin when Lori wasn't looking. I stayed up until midnight doing crosswords in bed. No drowsiness, no missing hours, not even a yawn. That's when I knew it wasn't my body failing me. It was someone else manipulating it. And just like that, I was a chemistry teacher again, back in the lab, hunting for proof. Every movement, every exchange became a data point. I started paying attention like my life depended on it, because it did. I checked my medications one morning while Lori was out. My prescription bottle of Zolpidem, a sleep aid I'd stopped taking 2 months prior, had exactly 3 fewer pills than it had the week before. I wasn't taking them. I hadn't even touched that bottle. But someone had. I marked the level discreetly with a Sharpie under the cap. 3 days later, it had moved again. I stood there holding the bottle heart thudding in my chest like I was holding a live wire. My fingers were trembling, not from age, not from weakness, but from rage. They were drugging me. Brad had always been the one to bring my dishes back to the kitchen. At first I thought it was courtesy, but now I saw it differently. He was checking for leftovers, making sure I'd taken the dose. He was never in the room when I fell asleep. Always conveniently elsewhere. Always conveniently quiet. Even my drawers had changed. I could feel it. My pill organizer was being rearranged. The bottle of ibuprofen had been moved from the left drawer to the right. My folder of health records had gone from alphabetical to random. And my original house deed was no longer where I kept it tucked under my spare sweaters. Gone. Just like that. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed deeply through my nose. They think I'm slow. They think I'm confused. They think age has dulled me into something docile and soft. They forgot I taught evidence-based logic to 3 decades of teenagers. They forgot I balanced budgets down to the penny while raising Lori alone after my husband passed. They forgot who I am. So I made a decision, the hardest one I've ever made. I would become exactly what they thought I was. I started calling Ethan my grandson and accidentally calling him Kevin. On speakerphone, of course, so Lori could overhear. I wandered into the pantry one afternoon, turned around twice and asked, "Where do we keep the spoons again?" At dinner, I said it was Monday. Lori corrected me. "Oh," I said softly. "Sorry, I guess I lost track again." The more I fumbled, the more confident they became. Brad started asking casually if I'd ever thought about setting up a permanent power of attorney just in case. Lori brought it up one evening like she was talking about the weather. "You know, Mom, if something ever happened, it would be smart to get some paperwork in order. You've been forgetting little things, and Brad's good with documents. Good with documents." That phrase lodged in my brain like a splinter. I nodded politely, pretended to think about it, said I'd sleep on it. And then I started making my own plans. Every time I was alone, I jotted notes on old receipts, sticky pads, even inside crossword books, times, names, phrases, food schedules. I was building a case, quietly, systematically, secretly, because they weren't just drugging me. They were building a narrative, a story they could sell to doctors, lawyers, maybe even a judge if they had to. And once that story was set in stone, once I signed over power of attorney, I'd be locked into a life I didn't choose. They could sell my house, move me to a facility, control every penny, every meal, every hour. I could feel it in their tone. Lori had started calling me sweetie more. Brad stopped making eye contact. Their movements around the house became stiff, controlled, like they were performing kindness instead of feeling it. One afternoon I overheard them in the laundry room. They didn't know I was just outside folding towels. "Brad, if she signs, you'll be able to take care of everything." Lori, nervous but quiet. "I know. It feels weird, like we're pushing her." "Brad, she's not going to know the difference soon. And it's not pushing. It's protecting her. Protecting. Is that what they called it?" I sat down on the stairs slowly, towel in my lap, and closed my eyes. They thought they were protecting me from myself, but I knew the truth. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting what they wanted from me. I'd seen it before in families where a parent's signature meant access to a house, a bank account, a car title. You give up your rights once thinking it's temporary, and suddenly everything with your name on it belongs to someone else. But not me. Not without a fight. So I played the role. Every day, for 2 more weeks. I burned toast and said I'd forgotten to plug in the toaster. I left the faucet running and couldn't remember turning it on. I even called Ethan during dinner and said, "Your mother's been so good to me lately. She helps me dress and everything. I'm just not the same anymore." Ethan was quiet on the other end, but I could hear the worry tightening in his voice. He was catching on. And when he said, "Grandma, do you want me to come visit you this weekend?" I said yes. Oh, I said yes, because I knew I couldn't do this alone forever. And if anyone was going to believe me, really believe me, it would be him. The knock on the door was soft but steady, just like it had been when Ethan was a little boy, 3 knocks a pause, then 2 more. I opened it before he could reach the second pause. "Hi, Grandma," he said, trying to sound casual, but I saw the worry in his eyes. And I knew in that moment I wasn't alone. The days leading up to his visit had been filled with whispered conversations, carefully staged distractions, and one trip to a hardware store that nearly gave me a heart attack. I'd ordered a miniature camera online hidden in a spice jar. It looked like ordinary oregano, but inside was a motion-activated lens with night vision and a high-definition recording chip. Installing it was the tricky part. I waited until Brad was mowing the lawn and Lori had gone out to run errands. I turned on the TV to the home shopping network and left the volume just high enough to hide any clinking sounds. Then I slipped into the kitchen and replaced the real oregano jar with my decoy. The next morning, I pretended to have a headache and skipped breakfast. Instead, I sat in my room and watched the footage through the tiny screen attached to the camera's receiver. And there it was. Brad. At the stove, grinding something white and fine with the back of a spoon. He reached into his pocket, pulled out my sleeping meds, my Zolpidem, and tapped 2 crushed pills into the soup pot. He stirred slowly like he had all the time in the world. I sat frozen, hand over my mouth. It wasn't just a theory anymore, it was fact. When Ethan arrived, I pulled him into the guest room, closed the door, and turned on the white noise machine Lori kept for when the baby visited. There was no baby, it was just a prop for her narrative. I looked my grandson in the eye and whispered, "They're drugging me." He blinked. Once, twice, then nodded. "I believe you," he said almost before I finished the sentence. I showed him the footage. His jaw tightened. "We need more than this," he whispered. "We need the pattern, motive, documents." We build a case just like we learned in class. Ethan was in his final year at Lewis and Clark Law School. He had always been the quiet one in the family, the listener, the note-taker. But his mind was sharp, and his loyalty to me was unwavering. He pretended his visit was casual, staying for lunch and chatting with Lori and Brad like everything was normal. He even complimented the soup. I nearly choked, holding in the irony. That night, while everyone slept, we got to work. First, the paperwork. I had always kept my documents filed in a locked drawer in my old house. When I moved in here, I brought a copy of the deed with me just in case. It took some digging through Lori's safe place drawer in the guest room dresser, but we found it. Still in my name. Brad hadn't gotten to it yet. Next, the forged draft of the power of attorney. We found it in a folder labeled Mom's Long-Term Care. It wasn't signed, but it was filled out down to the notary section with Lori's handwriting on the sticky tabs that said, "Sign here." I took a picture with Ethan's phone. Then came the prescriptions. I gave Ethan the pill bottle marked with my Sharpie. He compared it to my latest prescription printout, only he didn't find the printout in my things. He found it in Brad's office drawer behind a stack of bank statements. Someone had requested a refill for the sleeping pills I hadn't taken in months, and someone had used my online patient portal to do it. "We can prove unauthorized access," Ethan whispered. "They logged into your account and used your refill option. That's digital fraud." My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From a deep, seething anger I hadn't let myself feel in years. I had trusted them, raised Lori through sacrifice and sleepless nights, and this was how they repaid me. "What do we do now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Ethan looked at me like I was one of his professors. "We keep pretending," he said. "But now we record everything. We print emails. We screenshot the login timestamps, and we document every time they give you food or medication. You keep acting confused, but behind the scenes, we build the fire." He squeezed my hand. "When we light it," he said, "we're going to burn their whole lie to the ground." The next 2 weeks were brutal. I had to endure more soup, more smiles laced with poison, more fake concern. "You're so sleepy lately, Mom," Lori would say, rubbing my back like I was a child. "It's normal at your age," Brad added once. "Brain, slow down. We're just glad you're safe here with us." I wanted to scream, but I smiled. I nodded. I let them think the lights were dimming. Meanwhile, Ethan set up a private cloud drive. We uploaded the video footage, scanned the fake power of attorney, took photos of the pill bottles, the refill requests, the timestamps. Ethan even called a professor of his who specialized in elder law, just asking hypothetically for society. He said the professor confirmed that what we had could be considered attempted fraud, elder abuse, and unlawful administration of controlled substances. We weren't just angry now. We were ready. And the last straw came on a quiet Friday morning. I overheard Lori on the phone with someone, probably her sister. "If she signs, it's done. We can refinance the house, finally fix the kitchen. I'm tired of living off Brad's paycheck alone." She paused. "No, she hasn't signed yet, but she's almost there. She barely remembers what day it is anymore." That did it. The next morning I looked Ethan in the eyes and said, "Let's set the date. We end it this week." He nodded, jaw tight. "Dinner. Sunday. All 3 of us at the table. You say the prayer, I'll bring the truth." And I swear for the first time in months I felt alive again, because they thought they were winning. They thought I was slipping, but they forgot one thing: I'm Helen Carter, and I always finish what I start. They thought it would be a celebration. Brad and Lori planned everything: the catered dinner, the perfectly folded cloth napkins, even the fresh-cut flowers on the table. Brad's brother Mark was invited along with Lori's cousin Jenna and her husband. A respectable little gathering in the dining room under the glow of the glass chandelier Lori insisted made their home feel elevated. What they didn't know was that the main course wouldn't be served from the kitchen. It would come from me, and I wouldn't need to lift a finger. I sat at the head of the table, silent, small, wrapped in my favorite navy cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons and a slight tear in the left sleeve. I let my hands rest neatly in my lap, watched the silverware sparkle under the warm light, and smiled politely as everyone poured wine and complimented the roast beef. Lori hovered like a perfect host. Brad stood tall, proud, even like a man about to deliver good news. I could see it in the way he cleared his throat like he had a speech rehearsed. They had planned to announce that they would be taking over full care of me because my health had declined and that Mom has agreed to put everything in our hands legally and otherwise. They thought this was the night they sealed the deal. But what they didn't know was that their spotlight was about to swing wide and blind them. At exactly 6:42 p.m., the front door creaked open. Ethan Lori called out, forcing a brightness that didn't reach her eyes. "We didn't think you could make it tonight." "I couldn't stay away," he said with a calm, even tone. "Grandma and I always share Sunday dinners. It's tradition." Brad chuckled nervously. "We've got plenty of food. Come sit." "I will," Ethan replied. "But before anyone makes any announcements, I think Grandma would like to share a little something with the family." He placed a small black box at the center of the table. It was no bigger than a sandwich, but when he tapped a button, the box lit up and projected a video onto the cream-colored wall behind Lori. For a second, no one moved. Then the image sharpened. Brad, in the kitchen, grinding pills with the back of a spoon. The entire room fell silent save for the faint hum of the projector. He poured the white powder into a pot on the stove, my soup pot. No commentary, no dramatic music, just the cold, hard image of betrayal. The guests looked back and forth, faces frozen between disbelief and discomfort. Mark turned a shade paler. Jenna dropped her fork. Brad lunged forward. This is taken out of context." "Really?" Ethan said quietly, tapping his tablet. The video changed. Now it was a close-up of my prescription bottle. A time-stamped photo of the label marked with a Sharpie. Then a screenshot of the refill history on my patient portal, logged from Brad's IP address. And this Ethan added, swiping again. Up came the photo of the draft power of attorney, the yellow sticky tab that read, "Sign here," Lori's handwriting plain as day. But she's been confused. Lori stammered, her hands trembling. "She's been forgetful. We were just trying to protect her. Mom, you imagined half of this." I sat still, let the silence grow heavy. Then I spoke. My voice was quiet, but firm. "No, Lori, I didn't imagine anything. I let you believe I was forgetting because I wanted to see what you'd do." Her face crumpled. I continued, voice steady. "You thought I was fading, but I was documenting. Every word, every dose, every night I pretended to sleep while your husband drugged me to silence." "You're sick," Brad said, suddenly standing. "This whole thing is some twisted—" "Sit down," Mark said quietly, his face hard. "I saw that video. That wasn't care. That was control." Brad's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lori began to cry. "I didn't know he was doing that," she whispered. "I swear I didn't." I looked at her, not with hate, but with something colder. Disappointment. "I raised you better," I said, but maybe not strong enough to say no when it mattered most. Jenna cleared her throat. "Helen, is there anything we can do?" Ethan turned to me. I nodded. "Yes," I said, raising my head. "There is." I took a slow breath and looked around the table. "I want everyone in this room to know something clearly. I am not confused. I am not incompetent. And as of tomorrow morning, I'll be contacting my attorney to press charges for elder abuse, medical fraud, and attempted coercion." Gasps rippled through the room. Brad looked like he'd been slapped. Lori's sobs turned to short, sharp breaths. Ethan stepped in. "We've already consulted with a professor from Lewis and Clark's Elder Law Department. The evidence you've just seen, combined with blood tests confirming sedatives in her system, will hold up in court. And this," he held up the fake power of attorney, "this is premeditation. Are you trying to ruin our lives?" Brad hissed, red-faced. "You think you're some kind of hero?" "No," I said gently. "I'm just a mother who woke up in time." Then I stood up, slowly, but on my own. My health is fine. My mind is sharp. And I will not be used, manipulated, or silenced by my own family. If you wanted the house, you should have asked. If you needed money, you could have come to me. But instead, you poisoned your way toward control. Nobody said a word. Even the chandelier seemed to dim. I turned to the rest of the family. "I'm moving out tomorrow. I have a place waiting for me in Portland. and I won't be looking back." Lori sobbed harder. Brad stormed out of the room. But I didn't flinch, because for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I wasn't a puppet in someone else's story. I was me again, and this time I was writing the ending. That night after the guests had left and the dishes sat cold and untouched, Ethan helped me pack. We didn't talk much, but as we zipped the last suitcase, he looked at me and said, "You were amazing tonight, Grandma." I smiled. "I just told the truth." He paused. "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did?" I shook my head slowly. "I'm not sure they want to." "Will you miss them?" My hands stopped folding. I stared at the half-packed photo frame in my hands, me holding baby Lori, her eyes wide, her mouth open in laughter. Then I wrapped it in a towel and placed it deep in the suitcase. "I'll miss what I thought they were," I said quietly, "but I won't miss who they became." He nodded. The next morning, as we drove away from that house for the last time, I looked in the rearview mirror, not at the building, but at the version of myself I was leaving behind, the one who doubted her instincts, the one who second-guessed every memory, the one who nearly handed over her life out of fear of being a burden. That woman was gone, and what replaced her was a quiet storm. Still calm, but stronger than ever. I don't remember standing up, only that the room got quieter when I did. Maybe it was the shock on Lori's face, or the way Brad had stormed out and never returned. Maybe it was the way every set of eyes in that room, even the doubtful ones, turned toward me as if they were seeing me clearly for the first time. But I remember what I said. Word for word. I was never confused, I said loud and clear, not for a single moment. I only pretended because I needed to know just how far they'd go. Silence. I let them believe I was slipping, that I didn't know what day it was. I watched them crush pills into my soup. I saw them lay out a path to take everything I owned, and I kept quiet until I had enough truth to speak. I could feel the emotion rising in my chest, but I didn't let it shake my voice. Not now. Tonight was never going to be a family dinner. It was a transaction. They were going to use this evening to announce they'd taken legal authority over my life, that they'd be my guardians, and I'd become another signature, another name on the utility bills while they gutted my home and smiled about it. I looked around the table, Mark, Jenna, a few others who had said nothing but now sat stiff and pale. "Well, I have an announcement too," I said, looking directly at Ethan, who gave the faintest nod. "I've already contacted my attorney. Starting Monday morning, this house will be listed for sale. All legal documents are filed, notarized, and in motion. Lori and Brad have 7 days to pack up and leave." Gasps, whispering, the clink of someone's fork dropping onto their plate. I turned to Lori, who had gone from red-eyed to glassy and stunned. "You wanted to take over this home as your own. You treated me like a hurdle, a chore, an obstacle to your comfort. But let me make it perfectly clear, this house was never yours to take. And I will not spend another minute sharing a roof with people who thought I had to be poisoned to cooperate." Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom, please just—" "No," I said firmly. "I don't want apologies, not when they come from fear, not after all that's happened." I turned to Ethan and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. This young man reminded me that quiet doesn't mean weak, that observation isn't the same as surrender, that waiting, sometimes it's just part of the plan. Mark, Brad's brother, was the first to stand up. "I had no idea," he said, stepping toward me. "Helen, I'm sorry." I nodded, not out of forgiveness, but out of acknowledgement. He wasn't part of the betrayal, but he'd stood by too quiet. Then Jenna stood. She looked around, then walked to my side. "You've always been the sharpest one in the family," she said softly, wrapping me in a hug. "They mistook kindness for fragility. But I always knew you weren't someone to mess with." Her embrace was warm, steadying. I let myself lean into it for just a second. Because strength doesn't mean you never need to be held. It just means you get to decide when. That night, the house was too quiet. Ethan stayed the night just to be safe. He insisted on sleeping on the living room couch with a legal pad still half filled with notes, timelines, and contact info. I didn't sleep much. I sat in my room, lights off, just listening to the old creaks of the house I'd once called home. The stairs I used to hear Lori rush down every morning in high school. The refrigerator humming in the same key it had since '97. The gentle tick of the antique clock on the mantel. It all felt familiar and foreign. This house had carried laughter once, screams of joy, birthday candles, and warm cinnamon rolls in winter. But over the last few years, it had grown cold. Less home, more headquarters. And now I saw why. When people see you as a stepping stone, they stop treating you like a person. And I was never going to let that happen again. The next morning, Lori and Brad didn't say a word to me. They moved about like ghosts, packing boxes, closing drawers with exaggerated quiet, avoiding eye contact. Not once did they ask for mercy. Not once did they apologize with any real meaning. And I didn't seek it, because I wasn't looking for regret. I was looking for freedom. When the realtor came that afternoon to walk the property, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. I would sell this place, donate a portion to the local senior center, and move into the apartment Ethan had found for me in Portland, 2 bedrooms, walking distance to the art studio, and a small patio where I could grow rosemary and basil. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. No manipulation, no pills in the soup, no whispered lies in the hallway. Just me. A week later, as I rolled my last suitcase out to Ethan's car, my oldest sister Ruth came by. She hadn't said much the night of the dinner. She was always the one who let others speak first. But that morning she walked right up to me, tears in her eyes, and said, "You were never weak, Helen. You just waited for the moment you could hit back the hardest." She hugged me, then whispered, "I'm proud of you." I smiled. "Funny," I said. "For the first time in a long while, I'm proud of me too." And as we drove away from that house, I didn't feel loss. I felt reclamation, my voice, my life, my story. And this time no one was writing it but me. I used to think healing would feel like silence, like the absence of pain, but now I know it feels like a breath of cool morning air through an open window. It feels like mint tea steeping on the stove, like brushes clinking in glass jars, like the sound of gentle laughter from people who see you for who you are, not who they want you to be. It feels like waking up without fear. After selling the house, I moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the southeast corner of Portland with Ethan. It was nothing grand, creaky wood floors, a window that stuck sometimes, and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to dance in. But to me, it felt like a castle. And best of all, it was filled with choice. My choice. Every picture on the wall, every cushion on the chair, every teacup on the shelf, I chose them. Not because someone told me I had to, not because I was trying to appease a daughter or make peace with the son-in-law, but because I liked them. It had been years since I felt that kind of ownership over my life. Years since my voice wasn't filtered through someone else's plans. The first week there, Ethan set up a little art corner for me by the window. Just a folding table, a couple of stools, and a view of a scraggly pine tree. But it was enough. I hadn't touched a brush in almost 2 years. Somewhere between the hospital stay and the care I got at Lori's house, I'd lost the part of me that painted sunsets and river stones and faces I loved. But the first morning I sat down, I started with something simple. A lemon. Round, golden, sharp around the edges. Like me. The apartment was a block from St. Mark's, an old brick church with ivy crawling up the side and a sign out front that read, "Come as you are." So I did. I walked in one Wednesday afternoon and asked if they had space for a weekly art class. Something free, just for older adults. Maybe a few tables in the rec room and some folding chairs. The woman at the front desk blinked. "You'd be teaching, I'd be sharing." I smiled. Teaching feels too formal. I just want to help people remember how to hold a brush again. She grinned and handed me a clipboard. 3 weeks later, I stood in a room filled with the soft scratch of charcoal on paper, the scent of acrylic paint, and the quiet hum of Aretha Franklin playing from an old Bluetooth speaker. 5 students came the first day. 2 used canes. One had arthritis so bad she could barely hold a pencil. But they came, and they laughed, and they asked questions. And they forgot for a few hours about bills and grief and whatever had been holding them back. So did I. One afternoon after class, I was washing brushes in the kitchen sink when Ethan came in with a grocery bag. He pulled out a tiny pot of peppermint and set it on the windowsill. "For your tea," he said. I reached up, touched the leaves. "You remembered." "Of course," he said. "You're not easy to forget." That night I made myself a cup of mint tea and sat on the little porch just outside my bedroom. The city was quiet in that soft, dusky way Portland gets in early fall. You can hear the leaves crackle. You can feel the breeze just a whisper past the collarbone. I wrapped my cardigan around me and opened the leather-bound journal I kept on my lap. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote slowly. "No one gets to decide when I stop, not age, not fear, and certainly not family who tried to make me small. I am not done. I am just beginning." I capped the pen, leaned back in my chair, and took a sip of the warm, minty tea. In the distance, I could hear church bells. A car honked. Someone laughed down the street. Life unfiltered, uncontrolled, mine. And in that moment, I didn't just feel safe. I felt free. If this story moved you even just a little, I invite you to support the channel. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us share more true stories of resilience, quiet courage, and the strength that often goes unseen. Your support doesn't just help the channel grow, it gives voice to people like Helen whose stories deserve to be heard. So if you believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, heal, and remind us what matters most, hit that subscribe button, share this with someone who needs it, and consider becoming part of our growing community. Thank you for listening, and thank you for believing that no one is ever too old or too forgotten to rise again.